Welcome, everybody, on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA. My name is Michael Morgenstern, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our discussion with Anne Signett, a Holocaust survivor from Italy. Before we begin, I would like to share a few words about the museum. Holocaust Museum LA is the first Holocaust survivor-founded Holocaust museum in the United States. In the 1960s, a group of survivors worked together to create a memorial for their loved ones who perished in the Holocaust, and this memorial eventually became Holocaust Museum LA. These survivors did this at a time when the community was by and large not yet ready to face this tragic history. In the 1960s, the Holocaust had only ended 15 years ago. Thanks to their courage and their foresight, these survivors established the first Holocaust museum in the United States with a mission to commemorate, educate, and inspire future generations. Furthermore, they mandated that our museum should always be free to the public, making Holocaust education accessible to everyone. While we are not able to be in our museum's physical space for the time being, we are still able to carry forward their mission on a daily basis. This morning, you have the honor and privilege of listening to Anne Signett, who will share her story with you. And after Anne shares her story, you'll be able to type in questions. Those watching on Zoom can use the Q&A box. Those on Facebook can type in questions in the comments, and Anne will answer as many questions as possible. And now it is my honor to welcome Anne. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Anne has been speaking at our museum for quite a few years and has done a few Zoom talks with us as well. Anne, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Michael, for such a great introduction. Yes, my name is Anne Signett, but I was born Anna Bondi in Rome, Italy on September 5th, 1928. I had two brothers and a sister. I was the baby. My father was a successful businessman. My oldest brother, Amedeo, was a doctor, and he was a resident during the Holocaust or before, was a resident physician at a hospital in Rome. My second brother, Enzo, worked with my dad in his business. My sister, Clara, was a school teacher. And I was going to day school, which of course is a Jewish private school, which has the same curriculum as any public school, but of course there was Hebrew and Jewish education included. And I was very fortunate to attend the school. We'll learn in a moment. Italy before the Holocaust was a very pleasant place to live for Jewish people. Benito Mussolini was a dictator, yes, but he was a benevolent dictator. And Jewish people were in high-level positions in, in commerce, in the industries, in banking, in the professions, even in government and the military. And it was quite a happy childhood that I had. Um, as I said, my dad was a successful businessman. We had, we lived in Rome, but we had a beach place at Anzio, where we went to as soon as school was out every year, together with my aunt and uncle and their two children. It was such a happy time. I've been told of different instances that are funny that of course I don't remember because I was too little. But we went there during the summer permanently for 3 months. And my dad stayed in Rome and came on the weekend because he was busy making deals. I recall one, I don't recall, I was told many times of this particular incident, which always makes me chuckle, that it was the weekend and my dad was arriving on a train. And so we went to pick him up. And he had just concluded a very important deal. And it had happened to be a cash deal. And he had a lot of cash in his jacket. But it was summer and it was hot. He took his jacket off and handed it to my brother Enzo. All of a sudden, and he picked me up because I was a toddler. He picked me up and we started walking. And all of a sudden, he must have remembered that he had all that cash in the jacket and he didn't have his jacket. And so he started screaming, "My jacket, my jacket." And my brother Enzo, who was ahead, heard the screaming and he ran back and says, "I've got the jacket. You gave it to me." This, these are little episodes of my childhood that stand out. There are many because I was really very, very happy. But as benevolent as he was, Mussolini made a big, big mistake. He allied himself with Germany. And in 1938, the racial laws were passed. That's what they were called, racial laws. And they entailed demotions of all the Jews. They were demoted from their high-level places, and eventually they were fired. Jewish children could no longer go to public school. It did not affect me because I was going, as I said, to day school, but a lot of my friends were affected by this terrible law. In 1938, I graduated 5th grade and went to middle school, also a day school. And that's why, as I said earlier, I was very lucky that I was going to day school. In 1939, the war broke out. And Hitler had gone to Mussolini many times, asking him to give him Italian Jews. Mussolini had always refused at first, saying that Italian Jews were just as Italian as Italian non-Jews. Of course, he also didn't want to lose all that brain power. But in 1939, when the war broke out, Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia and Poland, went back to Mussolini and said, "I am going to conquer all of Europe. I'm going to give you a piece of it. You give me your Jews." Well, that offer was too alluring to refuse. Mussolini had always had delusions of grandeur. He wanted an empire. All had always wanted an empire. In 1935, he had invaded Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, and Libya. And that was his empire until he lost it. And so now here's Hitler telling him he can have his own empire again by having half of Europe. And so he relented. And Jews were put in concentration camps. There were a few concentration camps in Italy. I saw one on a visit back that my sister, we always went places whenever I went for a visit back. It was called La Risiera di San Saba. It was a rice processing plant that had been turned into a concentration camp for Jews. It was in Trieste, in northern Italy. And it was horrifying, just looking at it. And the list of people who died there, was displayed. Um, I, I, uh, I'm sorry. Whenever I think of that, I should not even have mentioned it because it stops me dead in my tracks. And my father was a very perceptive man, and the Allies had made a beachhead in 1943. The Allies had made a beachhead, that means a landing, in southern Italy at Salerno near Naples. And they were making pretty good time marching towards Rome. My dad estimated that they would be in Rome in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Italian people were sick and tired of Mussolini and his alliance with Hitler and deposed them. As a matter of fact, they later lynched him. And the Germans whisked him away to northern Italy, to a region that they called the Republic of Salò, which Mussolini ran, small area. And my dad, on October 15th, 1943, had my mom pack for 2 weeks for the three of us. 2 weeks because he estimated the Allies would be in Rome in 2 weeks. And also because now that Mussolini was gone, he expected the Germans to come in and take over completely. So my brother Amedeo was in a hospital as a resident physician. My brother Enzo had decided that he was going to cross the front lines and join the Allies, which he had done. Now, he went south, and he was being shot at by the Germans in the back, by the Americans in front, but somehow he made it across and was promptly arrested as a spy. He told us all this later. Well, he said, "I'm not a spy, I'm a Jew." And they didn't believe him. Well, in those days, in Italy, only Jews were circumcised. So my brother proceeded to prove that he was a Jew. Eventually, he became a translator, and with a detachment of the Fifth Army, American Fifth Army. And my sister, who was married to a captain in the Italian army who had deserted, his family had olive orchards up in the mountains, and that's where they went. And it was my brother-in-law, and in fact, who was instrumental in getting a Christian family in a nearby village called Alvito to hide us, the three of us, my mom and dad and I. And that's where we were going when my dad had my mom packed for 2 weeks. And that's where we went. And the Allies were unfortunately stopped dead in their tracks at Casino, because across from the valley, this little village where we were in hiding was across the valley from the other mountain range on the other side. There was a high mountain that was called Monte Cassino, and on top of this mountain was a monastery that the Germans had stockpiled with weapons and ammunition. And so the Allies were stopped dead in their tracks. And our 2 weeks turned into 10 months. Meanwhile, in Rome, the Germans came the day after we escaped, on October 16th, 1943. The Germans came to Rome and started rounding up Jews. So we escaped just in time. But my brother Amedeo couldn't go home because there were two German soldiers taking turns night and day sitting in front of our house, waiting for us to come home. So my father was a genius in getting us out of there in the nick of time. So we spent 10 months in this little village. And fortunately, as I said, my dad had the money to keep us in food that the farmers were more than glad to sell us. And my mom and dad never left the house. I was sent on errands, and I met some friends, some little girls there that I became friends with. And I even went to church with them. Of course, I didn't know what to do, but I did what they did. They stood, I stood. They knelt, I knelt. And my mom was upset that I did that, but my dad felt that it was a very good idea, and that it would strengthen. See, I never knew whether the villagers knew that we were Jewish, but if they didn't, this would strengthen their belief that we were not. And if they did, they didn't give us away. And to whom? There was nobody there. The Germans were not in Alvito. Somebody gave us a dog, a female dog that we called Diana because it was a hunting dog. And Diana, of course, was the goddess of the Roman goddess of the hunt. And Diana was so sweet. She wouldn't hurt a fly. She was a wonderful dog, and I loved her very much. My mom would send me to the general store from time to time to pick up some whatever staples were available. And this particular time, she asked me to go to the general store, and it was getting dusk. So I took Diana with me, and you have to picture this. This is a little mountain village. There were no paved streets. It was all cobblestones. And the streets were not necessarily level. But at any rate, the street that I needed to take to go to the general store was narrow, and of course, cobblestones, and all downhill. So I started walking downhill with Diana at my side. And all of a sudden, at the bottom of the hill, the bottom of the street, I saw a German soldier. And I knew there were no Germans in Alvito. Now all of a sudden there's this soldier. Well, I didn't know why, but I kept on walking downhill, and he kept walking uphill. When he got to where I was, he suddenly veered and grabbed my coat, ripped all the buttons off of it. I screamed, but if anybody heard me, no windows opened. And Diana, sweet little Diana, who would never hurt a fly, lunged at this German soldier and scared the wits out of him because he let go of me and started running up the hill. And to this day, I thank God that someone gave us Diana. Diana eventually was run over by a German truck. I got to the general store, and I told the owner knew me, and I told him what had happened. So he walked me back to the house. I had lost a shoe running downhill, and I hadn't stopped to pick it up. So we picked up my shoe. Diana, meanwhile, had gone to the house. and I was trying to get my dad to go with her. My dad had never been out of that house. But obviously, seeing Diana by herself without me, understood that something happened to me. And so he started to come with Diana. But by that time, the store owner and I had already reached the house, so it wasn't necessary. Needless to say, my mother never sent me back to that general store alone. So the reason that that German was there, the general store owner told me, was that the Allies had made a broken through, and the Germans were retreating and coming through Alvito. And that's what the German was doing there. He was part of a detachment that was retreating from Monte Cassino, from Cassino. So it was the greatest news that we could hear. In the meantime, my brother Enzo, who was with the American Fifth Army, had gone to Rome, and Rome was liberated on June 4th, 1944. One day I was playing with my little girlfriends, and one of them came to me and said, your brother is here. Oh, I have to backtrack a little bit. My brother Amedeo couldn't go home because of the two soldiers that were in front of the house. So he took the night shift at the hospital in order to have a roof over his head during curfew, until the administrator told him that he had to leave because Germans were coming every day looking for doctors with Jewish last names. And we had a very Jewish last name, Bondi, which in Hebrew means Yom Tov. So he didn't know where to go. And so he got on a freight train. He knew where we had gone, of course, on a freight train, and some on foot, some by ox cart. He eventually reached us at Alvito and stayed with us for the rest of the time. So when this little girl came and told me, your brother is here, I said, yes, I know, he's been here for some time. She said, no, your other brother. I didn't believe her. So she took me to a street corner, and sure enough, there he was, my brother Enzo. When I finally was able to take my arms from around his neck, we needed to devise a plan on how to tell mom. My mother had been crying herself to sleep every night. I could hear her. She would cry herself to sleep, not knowing what happened to her son. Was he dead, alive? Had the Germans taken him? Was he in a concentration camp? Did they kill him? And she would speak of this almost every day. And then she cried at night. And so we sure didn't want her to get a heart attack by breaking this news to her. So I went, and it took me an awful long time, but by and by, I convinced her at first that there was a possibility existed that Enzo was alive. Secondly, that he may have gone to Rome. Thirdly, that he may have found out where we were and may have even come here. At first, she started to say, yeah, sure, no. But by and by, she accepted the idea of the possibilities. And when I saw that she was ready to accept, I opened the door and I let my brother in. And you can imagine the scene. It was heartwarming. It was just heart. It was beautiful, beautiful scene. And my mom finally could sleep at night without having to cry. We stayed a little longer, but my two brothers went back after a while to Rome. Squatters had taken over our house. And so there was a lot of work to be done to clean up and everything. And so we stayed until August of 1944 so that we could go back home. And when we did, we tried to resume a normal life. Um, my dad started his business again, and my brother opened a medical office. My other brother worked with dad again and eventually took over the business when my dad died. And my sister went back to teaching school. And me, well, my education had been interrupted by the Holocaust. And I was ashamed to go back to school because I would be a year older than everybody else. So thankfully, my dad's business was good, and I completed my education by private tutor. After that, I heard that the Americans had established a military police headquarters with the provost marshal at Ciampino Airport. That's one of the big airports of Rome. And they needed a translator because in addition to the provost marshal, in addition to the American military police, there was also on the other side, the Italian military police. And they made arrests sometimes, and they had to make reports to each other to coordinate and everything. And so I translated because I spoke English fluently, as did all my siblings. The reason being that at those days in Italy, um, after grammar school, when you went to middle school, sixth grade, um, you had to take Latin, of course, 4 years, and then you had the choice of English or French. And my brothers are both taken English, and then when my sister, she took English, and I came 7 years after my sister, so there was a big gap in age, and I could hear them practicing all the time when I was little. And when it came my turn to go to sixth grade, I took English too. And then I continued with my tutor. So anyway, we all spoke fluent English, and I went as a translator for the provost marshal, American provost marshal. And I met the provost sergeant there, and his name was Robert Signett. Yes, you guessed it. We were married 18 months later. And it was not an easy decision to make, leaving my family, my friends, my country, to go live with strangers 7,000 miles away. It wasn't an easy decision to make. And my parents made it quite clear. They told me, we will not stand in the way of your happiness. If you really want to marry this man, if you love him enough, we will not stand in your way. But remember, and they told me in Italian, the equivalent of you make your bed, you lie in it. When my husband went to formally ask for my hand, my husband to be, to my father told him, in this house, my daughter has always been a princess. If she marries you, she'd better be a queen. He treated me like a queen all our married life. When he died, we had been married for 57 years. 57 beautiful, loving years. Oh, sure, we had our ups and downs. All married couples do. But we had 2 children, a girl who died recently, and a boy. So I only have 1 son left who has no children. But my daughter had 2 boys, and one of them married very, very young and had 2 boys. I had been feeling guilty after the Holocaust when we came back to Rome. Although my immediate family all survived, dozens of cousins. My father had 7 sisters and a brother. My mother had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Cousins, dozens of our relatives had been taken and murdered by the Nazis. And I started feeling this terrible feeling of guilt that I survived and they didn't. And they were murdered. Why them and not me? But people kept telling me that I should not feel guilty because God had a purpose in mind when he saved me from the Nazis. That purpose revealed itself in the year 2000. My grandson, my daughter's oldest son, who was married so young, didn't last as expected, had 2 children and divorced. His ex-wife and her family asked to have a meeting with me. So we met, and the purpose of the meeting was that she felt, and her family too, felt that she was unfit to be a mother. In her own words, I am a 17-year-old in a 27-year-old body. And she was abusing the children. And if the family realized it, and she realized it. And the purpose of the meeting is that they were asking me to take the boys. Those boys have spent every weekend at our house since they were born, because while they were married and even after they were divorced, those boys were brought to our house on Friday, and she came and picked them up on Sunday night. So they, I had everything for them. I had a bedroom for them, and I had all the clothes and everything. At first, I had stacks of diapers when they were babies. I'd taken care of them every weekend. So it seemed logical to them that I would be willing to take them in. And yes, it was logical. And they told me that if I didn't want to, if I wasn't going to take those boys, they would be put in a system. And I couldn't fathom those 2 boys that I loved so much being put in a foster system. So I said I needed to talk to my husband, but that, I would let them know, but I already knew in my heart that we were going to take him in. And so I talked to my husband about it. And then I told them that if we were going to take them in, it would not be the way it was on weekends, because I didn't want something like her changing her mind in a year or two and wanting them back. And that if I was going to take them in, it would have to be done in a legal way. And so that's how I became their legal guardian and raised them both. And they were both bar mitzvah in my temple. They went to Sunday school, they went to Hebrew school, and as I said, they were bar mitzvah. Then they went to New Community Jewish High School, which is a private school in West Hills, which became the Toledo High School. They changed the name and they moved to different place after the boys graduated. The Toledo family was a rich family that endowed the school with tons of money, so they named the school after them. But at the time the boys went, there was New Community Jewish High School. I have to say that I am very proud of both of them. They both own their own business. The younger one told me a few weeks ago he and his wife have a store. They were going to open another store because business was good. And I am so happy. The older one has a baby boy who is going to be a year old on the 26th of May. And he is so beautiful. You shouldn't say beautiful of a boy. You should say handsome. But this boy is beautiful. I love him, and I hardly ever see him. But my great grandson, because that's what they are. They're my grandson's children. My great grandson is a computer whiz. He works with computers, and he dotes on this boy. Um, he eats holding him on his knee. It and his wife has what she calls a family album on computer, and when she posts pictures of the baby as he grows, well, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw him standing at 10 months. And when they came here for the Seder on Pesach, he was walking, 10 months old. He was walking. I don't think, incredible. He's growing so well, and they take good care of him. Perhaps moving him along a little faster than I would, but if he can do it, great. Now he's cutting teeth. So to get back to my story, my husband and I were married on a fateful anniversary, October 15th. Remember, we escaped from Rome on October 15th, 1943. We were married on October 15th, 1947. And 11 days later, we sailed for America. Getting married wasn't really easy for more than one reason, not just the fact that it was so difficult to make such an important decision, but on the other side, there was a panel of 3 American officers that interviewed me and asked me a whole bunch of questions, gave me the third degree. I came out with flying colors because I could speak English fluently, and that was a big asset to them. So anyway, 11 days later, we sailed. Our honeymoon was in between those few days. we went to Pisa, and yeah, guess what? My parents came along. Well, I can understand. Parents shouldn't go on their children's honeymoons, but this was unusual. I was going to leave them for who knows how long. As it turned out, it was 9 years before I was able to go back for my first visit because I wasn't working, there wasn't any money, there wasn't much money, uh, but uh, my dad died in 1951 and I wasn't able to go to his funeral. He was only 65 years old. And it was 1956, 9 years before I could go back for a visit. I took the boys. I took my children, Judy and Dan, and my husband stayed to work. He didn't come with us, but it was our first trip back, and the my children's first time to see Italy, and it was wonderful. After that, we went back more often, um, and my husband came too, because as as long as the children were um, little, I didn't work. But when they went to school, then my husband, who, well, I skipped an important part. Um, we, when I came to America, there was a culture shock. Yes, of course. But it was diminished by the fact that I spoke English fluently. Whereas some of my friends were also war brides. Yeah, that's what we were called, war brides, who didn't speak English, had a tough time. Some of them came back, went back to Italy. But I decided that I was going to get adjusted to this. I came from a big city, Rome, and I was transported to a little town in Northern California, Redding. It's grown into a city now, but then my husband used to like to say, you stand in one end of this town, you spit, and you reach the other end. And and, and so it was. And it was hard for me. And I tried very, very hard to adjust. Um, to to um, to put a little humor, um, when we arrived, my mother-in-law had prepared spaghetti for lunch because I'm Italian. Naturally, I needed spaghetti. So um, at one point, we were there at their house, and I needed to use the bathroom. And I had seen there was a door ajar as I went by. I saw it, and I saw the end of a bathtub. So I knew where the bathroom was. I excused myself and headed straight for that room. Well, the bathtub was there, but I didn't see a toilet. And I thought, well, this is America. All you got to do is push a button and the toilet comes out of the wall, like they do beds. I'd seen that in a movie, a bed coming out of the wall. And that's, you know. And so I started looking for the button to push, and I couldn't find the button. Meantime, I really needed to use the bathroom. So I went back out and I called my husband out and I told him, I said, I can't find the button. He says, what button? I said, the button that I have to push in order for the toilet to come out of the wall. He started laughing uncontrollably. Then he took me by the hand and took me outside. Yep, you got it, an outhouse. This is America, I thought. Even that little mountain village where we were had indoor plumbing. Well, it turned out that their parents were putting in a new bathroom and they got the tub and they were getting the rest of the fixtures later. But that was quite an experience. I had never in my life used an outhouse. So a lot of little things that happened from time to time that I decided I faced them. And my decision was no matter what I'm faced with, I will overcome it. I have to, because I am not going to go back to Italy with my tail between my legs. And so I did. And I adjusted. It wasn't easy. I didn't have my mother to tell me how to take care of a baby. When Judy was born, my sweet little Judy was a guinea pig. I didn't know how to take care of a baby. We lived in a converted mobile home. There was no longer on wheels, and I was afraid that she would catch cold, so I kept a bunch of blankets piled up on top of her in her bassinet, and I kept the house at 90 degrees. And poor kid, she got sick because I had to uncover her to change her diapers. And so you know, it just, I learned the hard way, but I did learn because my son had it a little easier because of the mistakes that I made with Judy. At 5 weeks, she had pneumonia. And the hospital that she went to, fortunately, she could be in a room where I could be so that I could continue nursing her. But I couldn't sleep because she would cough and I would have to turn her over gently so that she could spit out the phlegm. And so I couldn't sleep. I couldn't take a shower. I couldn't leave her alone. And my husband decided he was going to hire a nurse so that I could get a good night's sleep. So he did. But it wasn't a registered nurse. It was a practical nurse. And she had no idea how to take care of a baby. When she coughed, she picked her up in the middle and flipped her over. And her little head was going up and down. Could I sleep after that? Of course not. And, I told her there were sterilized bottles to give her to give her water when from time to time. So she took the water from the tap instead of the sterilized water that I had. And, I just couldn't sleep after that. And I told her, get out of here. And so after that, I convinced the doctor that we should be put in a better room with a better exposure. They said a northern exposure never saw the sun. And so he did. He changed us to a different room and Judy got well. And Danny was, he was 4 months old when he got a bronchitis. And he had taken to a hospital that didn't have a room for me to stay so that I could continue nursing him. It was a different hospital, and so they put him on a bottle, and he got sick because he wasn't used to the formula, and I had no idea what kind of formula they gave him. But by and by, that too passed. I had a friend also from Rome who had married an American, a friend of my husband, who lived in the San Fernando Valley. So after my husband was discharged, he went to work in Reading, and we after a while he had a 2-week vacation, and we decided to visit our friend, and our friend invited us, my friend and his friend, and so we went. We came down to the San Fernando Valley. When I saw the San Fernando Valley, I told my husband, go get a job. This is where I want to live and die. I don't want to go back to Reading. So his friend took him around, putting applications in at Lockheed, General Motors, Norfolk, different places. The 2 weeks went by, and I was just desperate. I was packing because the next day we had to go back to Reading, and he didn't have a job. And that very night, a telegram came to my friend's house, because that's the address that he always put down on his applications. A telegram came from General Motors telling him to report for work on Monday morning. I was elated. So he went and he told them our situation, that we were from Reading, that he wanted the job very bad, and could they give him a week to make the transfer from the move from Reading. So we rented a little place, we were in a little apartment, and went to Reading. We left my little boy. Danny was 7 months old. This was September of 1950. And we left him with my friend, and we took my little girl back with us, and we rented a U-Haul trailer, and his brother-in-law helped him load it, and everybody was thinking, saying even, they'll be back. They're never going to make it. Well, that made us even more determined. We had an old 37 Buick, and we had problems along the way. My husband, he knows cars very well, and so he was able to fix the problems that aroused along the way. But we got to the bottom of the ridge route, and it's a very steep uphill coming from Bakersfield and the flats. There was a problem in that second gear had gone out of the transmission. And my husband was planning on starting up as long as he could in low gear, and then shift into third and keep on going. And so this is what we did. And we started up the hill. On the fast lane, there were 2 lanes. On the slow lane, there were trucks. And all of a sudden, one of these trucks that was in front on the right side, that was behind another truck, decided to pass this other truck. And here we were. And we were in first gear, going straight as fast as we could, so that we could shift into third, and here the truck right in front of us. So we, that stopped traffic, because, we could just crawl in first gear until that truck had passed. And then my husband gunned it again and started all over again. Eventually we made it. My mom used to say, when I was when I got away with from a bad situation, she always told me that God keeps his hand on my head. Well, I guess God was keeping his hand on my head, because we made it. We made it through and came back downhill, which was not a problem at all for that old Buick. So he went to work for General Motors. And he worked for General Motors for 38 years. We bought a house on the GI Bill with $100 down. And I didn't go to work as long as Judy and Denny were preschooler. We're not going to school. But then I did. And I went back to school also, because I was a ragioniera, an accountant, Italian style. So I needed to learn accounting in American way. Well, double entry is the same in any language, but there were different phraseology, different language to address this accounting in the States, which is different from Italian. And so I did. I went to CSUN, and eventually I went to work as a controller for an air conditioning company. And I made before I did that, I went to work for a company that made freeway sign structures. The structures, not the green panels; those were furnished by the state. We'd made the steel structures. Yes, that's I said we because I went to work there, and eventually I bought a piece of the company as well. And so I was there for 11 years until we dissolved, and we went public. Halfway through, I took the company public with my accounting skills. With had to file special documents with the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission, had to file quarterly reports and so forth. But we did. We went public, and I made good money. And we decided to buy real estate because I realized that that's where it was at. Real estate was the way to invest. So at first we bought at a rental house, and then we bought a 4-unit, traded the rental house, sold it, and bought it at a 4-unit building. And then we sold the 4-unit and bought an 8-unit. And then we also bought an 11-unit. And these were going to be our income. In our old age, they were going to support us. But in 1994, the Northridge earthquake came, and we didn't have earthquake insurance. And the buildings were practically destroyed. So told the banks, come and get them. Bank took them back, and we didn't have anything except our work. And what was supposed to be keeping us in our old age turned out to be that I had to work until I was 80 years old. Am I staying my welcome? Are there questions that I can answer?
Thank you so much, Anne, for sharing your story with us. We do have some questions from members of the audience. The first question is, do you have any pictures of Diana?
No, I didn't even have a camera then. Diana, sweet little Diana. She was a pointer. She was used to pointing at birds. Loved her.
Do you remember what did she look like?
She was white with some brown, and no one had cut her tail. See, we had in my family, we've always had dogs, and my brother, who was also a hunter, he had a pointer that we called Bill, and he had his tail cut and his ears shaped. because that's what they said that you have to do to pointers. But Diana, nobody had done that to her. Her ears were flopping and she had a long tail. I love that dog. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. We do have some other questions. Before we do that, though, I would like to share with the audience a couple of pictures that I have of Anne.
Thank you. That's from the book, huh?
Yes, I got these from a book called How We Survive that Anne co-wrote. It's called 52 Stories from Child Survivors of the Holocaust, in which Anne is one of 52 stories featured. And when was this photo taken?
I was 14 years old. It was taken in Rome. Oh yes, that's at Anzio where we had our beach house. That's me, the little girl in front. I was 3 years old. On the left, that's my sister Clara. Next to her is my oldest brother Amedeo. Next to him is my other brother Enzo, the one who crossed the front lines. Next to him is my cousin Anita and my cousin Enzo, whom we vacationed with every summer at Anzio, with his family, with his mom and dad. Their father was my mom's brother. And that's why his name is also Enzo, because my mom's and her brother's father's name was Crescenzo. And so they named my brother and my cousin also Enzo. Now my dad, he had 7 sisters, so I had many cousins called Amedeo, because my grandfather, my father's father name was Amadio, which means loves God. So from Amadio, they changed the name to Amedeo. And so I had, before the Holocaust, I had 4 or 5 cousins named Amedeo, because we were all named after our grandparents. Amedeo was named after my father's father, Amadio. My Enzo was named after my mother's father, Crescenzo. My sister Clara was named after my father's mother, Chiara, the only grandparent I've ever known. Loved her dearly. She died when I was 6. And I was named Anna, which was the name of my mother's mother. And my mother lost her mother when she was 6 years old, and her father when she was 11. She was raised by her oldest brother. So Nonna Chiara was the only nonna, the only grandmother that I knew. And she died when I was 6. My first grief in life was when my nonna died. I loved her so much. People don't realize how important, yeah, maybe they do, how important grandparents are in the lives of their grandchildren.
Thank you so much for sharing that. What's a memory that you have of your grandmother?
Every day, excuse me, every day after dinner was at 1:00. We had the big meal in the middle of the day, and we had not dinner, but supper at night, which was a smaller meal, European style. And every day after dinner, she went for a walk. And when she came back, she always brought me something. Usually, she brought me a little bag of lacrime d'amore, which means love tears. They were little bitty balls of candy with sugar water inside. I have never forgotten that. That and another memory that I have of her involves my sister. My sister had a rag doll. It was called Lola. I remember that like it was yesterday. And she would put Lola in my grandma's bed. And my grandma would go to bed at night and she got used to it, but sometimes she would forget. And she would feel it with her feet and jump. And then she would say, Ah, Abuvatsa. Oh, it's the doll. Another memory that I have of her is that she made beautiful, delicious kosher salami. She would sit in the kitchen, and I can see her now stuffing the beef inside these skins, this whatever, she would just stuff that and then prick the thing, and then stuff it some more and then prick it with a needle. I don't know why, but I used to love to watch her, and I loved even more eating the salami that she made. It was so good. Yeah,
Thank
those are
you.
sweet, sweet memories.
Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Other questions?
I had a few questions. What business did your father do?
Clothing business. My father was a very smart man. Um, he had tailors working for him, and he made suits, tailor-made suits. And it struck on him the fact that in the Italian army, soldiers were furnished their uniforms, but officers had to buy their own. So my father, who had traveling salesmen, and my brother was one of them, um, would they would go to barracks or military establishment and approach officers with an offer to make their uniforms tailor-made, and they could pay on time. My father was the first to offer credit because everything else was cash on the barrelhead. So that's what happened. He made tailor-made. He had his tailors make the traveling salesman would take the orders and the measurements and the deposit, and the tailors would make the uniforms, and and they were the officers made monthly payments, and that was something that nobody had ever done, and eventually credit became a thing, but my father was the first, and they had no other access to credit, so my father did very well.
Thank you very much. And did you come from a religious family?
Yes, um, we went to services every Friday night, and my oldest brother Amedeo would say the kiddush before dinner, and I went to day school. You see, my mom wanted to make sure I learned Hebrew, and because she didn't speak Hebrew, I knew I knew the history more or less, but I learned it formally. At the name of the school was Vittorio Polacco, and of the grammar school, um, and we were Orthodox, except that we weren't called Orthodox. There was no such thing as Orthodox, conservative, reform. It was all called traditional. And the beautiful, um, the beautiful synagogue, the great synagogue in Rome, that's along the Tiber, has a Gothic style, but it didn't have an elevator, and the men sat downstairs, and we would have to climb up to the stratosphere in order to be able to take part in the service. And there was, well, you know what a mejita is. It separates the men from the women. And we had intricate ironwork type fencing separating us. And we could, so through the little bitty openings, we could put our eye and see the men downstairs. Hardly could see the bema, hardly could see the Holy Ark, but you know, that's what they did to women. I remember when my husband and I, the first time we went to Israel, we went to the Kotel, the Western Wall, and because we wanted to take part in Friday night services at the wall, but it was a cacophony of sounds. There was a minyan here, a minyan there. It was just impossible to pray. So we decided to go to one of the synagogues. There's so many around there, and we headed towards one. And when we got there, they sent me to the back. They let him in the front, sent me to the back, upstairs. So I went upstairs, and there were a couple of women up there. A couple of women, they were talking a mile a minute. I asked one of them if they spoke English. My Hebrew wasn't that great. And I asked where could I find the Siddur. They looked at me like I was from another planet. What would a woman want with a Siddur? So they told me that there should be some under one of those seats that open up. I opened up, and sure enough, there were some Siddur. I tried to follow the service as best I could. And the melodies, of course, were all unfamiliar to me, but some of them were, like for the Kaddish and the Shema. And I joined in. Both of these women, their necks snapped looking at me. I shut up right away. This isn't the way women should be treated. It's a shame. They keep women in the dark. So my husband was very clear with me. No Orthodox services. You and I are sitting together. We're going to join a conservative temple. And we did. And I've been a member of my temple for 46 years. And I'm very active. I chair a committee, and I'm also a member of the ritual committee. And we plan all everything that happens religiously. Yes, I came from a religious family, mostly my mother. I can't say the same for my brothers, but mostly my mother. But my brothers were, acceptably religious.
Thank you very much for sharing. After you came to live in the United States, how often would you see your family? I know you mentioned your father died in, I think, 51. What about your mother and brothers? How often would you see them, or would you go there? Would they come here?
My mother would never set foot on an airplane. She would not fly. And she and my dad had a boating accident on their honeymoon. So she didn't want to get on a boat. She never came. Amedeo and his wife came once. Enzo and his wife came several times. Clara came with Enzo, and then with her daughter, my niece, and her husband. And I correspond with my niece about once a week still. And she and Amedeo's daughter are the only, and his son are the only relatives I have left in Italy. I went, my husband and I went from 1956 when I went with Judy and Danny, but not my husband. It was a while before we went back. It was 1964. But then after that, we went every couple of years. My father died in 1951. My mother died in 1974. She was 86. My sister died of cancer in 2003. She was 71. And my Amedeo, who was eventually, he specialized in cardiology, and he would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go on his rowing machine, and he died of a heart attack. And Enzo became blind because he developed a clot behind his retina, and he went blind. But he lived until 2007. He died in 2007, and he was 88. I am the one who has outlived them all. I am 92, and thank God I am still going.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Before the war started, what was anti-Semitism like in Italy? Did you feel it? And did you live in a Jewish neighborhood, or did you live with, in a mixed
No, no, we never lived. The only Jewish neighborhood is what they used to call the ghetto, which became the Jewish quarter to be nice. No, we never lived there. We always lived in the city, in other areas. And we were living at Monteverde, which means Green Mountain. You know, Rome was built on 7 hills. Monteverde was one of them. Anti-Semitism did probably exist, veiled, because, as I said, Mussolini saw fit to put Jews in high positions, and so it wasn't too obvious, but it was there. It was hidden. I had an experience with it when I must have been about 10 years old or so. A girl that was supposed to be my friend, she was probably a year or two older than me. One day we had an argument, or I can't remember what happened. She said to me, Abramuccio, tia valigia parti, which means, little Abraham, pack your bags and leave. Now, she's, like maybe 11, 12. Where was she here? Something like that. At home, of course, from her parents or whoever. So, but generally, anti-Semitism, if there was some, was not so evident. We were hidden by a Christian family in the mountains, and a lot of Jews were hidden by Christian families, and also by priests and nuns in convents going against the Pope's wishes, because he was a miserable man. Pope Pius XII, they called him the silent Pope because he didn't defend the Jews. He was worse than silent. He was suspected of being a collaborator with the Nazis. And so when a convent opened its door to some Jews, they didn't tell the Pope about it. Some Jews were hidden in the Vatican at his own, without his knowledge. So I am very thankful for those who are we call the righteous Gentiles, who hit us, who helped us. So anti-Semitism is violent today. Today, all over Europe, including Italy, I must say, I'm ashamed to say, anti-Semitism has raised its ugly head all over Europe. Let's face it, in America too.
Thank you for sharing that. To conclude, what is something that you would like people to take away from learning your story?
What I would like them to take away is tell it. You don't need to tell my story precisely, but the horrors of the Holocaust. What was done? 6 million Jews were murdered at the hands of monsters who epitomize men's inhumanity to men. 6 million. Tell it to anybody who listens. Tell your children. Make sure they tell their children and their children's children. Make sure that this is never forgotten, because if it's not forgotten, we can hope that it will happen never again.
Thank you so much, Anne, for sharing your story with us today. We have everybody watching now I know they'll take that message to heart, and they'll be sure to repeat your story. And I also invite everybody watching now who doesn't already to join us every Thursday at 11 o'clock, where we have survivors speak and share their stories. You can follow our website, holocaustmuseumla.org, to see all of our upcoming programs. We have several virtual programs a week focused on Holocaust education and survivor testimonies. And of course, we hope to welcome everyone to the museum in person at some point, hopefully in the near future. But in the meantime, we are continuing to educate virtually. If anybody here is a teacher or knows a teacher, we offer virtual museum tours and survivor talks to schools as well. Thank you so much again, Anne, and thank you everybody for your questions and for your attention. And wishing everybody a happy, healthy, safe weekend. And
thank you. The same to you, Michael.
thank you so much, Anne, as always, and have a good rest of the day.